We are just waiting for one more guest to join us, and then we'll start the webinar. Thank you for your patience.
I've joined. Is you, is your name.
Thank you so much to everyone for your patience. We were experiencing some technical glitches, but we are back now. First and foremost, welcome, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, our global audience joining us today from wherever you are. Welcome to the Women as Drivers of Climate Food Systems from Soil to Sea. And in today's webinar, which will focus on women's climate smart adaptation stories in agriculture and aquaculture, our distinguished guests will discuss the progress and the challenges of continental initiatives like the Malabo Declaration, explore innovative approaches to integrating traditional and modern knowledge systems, and examine how emerging technologies and climate resilient practices are shaping food systems driven by women. My name is Sam, and I'm the marketing manager for research engagement at Taylor and Francis. And I'm delighted to be hosting this series brought to you through an exciting collaboration between Taylor and Francis and the Agricultural Research Council of South Africa. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our partnering organizations. Taylor and Francis is a leading international academic publisher with over 200 years experience in advancing knowledge across the sciences and humanities. With a portfolio of more than 2,700 journals and thousands of books, Taylor and Francis is committed to supporting researchers, academics, and practitioners in sharing vital knowledge that addresses global challenges, which includes climate change, food security, and gender equality. Our collaboration partner, the Agricultural Research Council of South Africa, is the country's premier agricultural research institution, which was established in 1990. The ARC conducts research with and for the agricultural sector, focusing on sustainable agricultural practices, food security, and rural development across the continent. Their work directly supports smallholder farmers, many whom are women, in developing climate-resilient agricultural systems. Together, these organizations recognize that women are not just participants in Africa's food systems, they are the drivers of innovation, adaptation, and transformation from soil to sea. In 2025, history was made when Miss Faluke Ariola became the first African woman elected as global president of World Aquaculture Society, a testament to her decades of hard work, perseverance, and belief in the transformative power of aquaculture. From her early days at the Nigeria's Federal Department of Fisheries to a legacy of many firsts, such as being the first female national president of the Fisheries Society in Nigeria. Her extraordinary career spanning over 40 years has become a beacon of hope for women in science and youth and underserved communities. As global president-elect, Ms. Ariola has outlined a visionary agenda which is advancing global collaboration, promoting inclusive aquaculture development, and amplifying underrepresented voices. Her leadership inspires a new generation of aquaculture researchers and practitioners who see sustainability not as a buzzword, but as a duty. In her keynote address, Harnessing Blue Economy Pathways for Africa's Climate Smart Futures, Opportunities for Women, Youth, and Community-Led Innovations, we are honored to hear from President Faluke, a leader who has redefined what is possible when passion meets purpose. Madam Faluke Ariola, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm trying to open my slides. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Sam. My name is Dr. Foluke Areola, and I'm speaking today on harnessing blue economy pathways for African climate smart food future opportunities for women, youth, and community-led innovation. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, I thank Francis Taylor and Group for the opportunity and the privilege to speak on harnessing blue economy pathways for climate smart food future opportunities for women, youth, and community-led innovation. Over the past few days, in honor of the Fisheries Day, I have spoken on topics related to aquaculture, including food, energy, education, youth, women, innovation, and economy. However, today's topic is broader in scope, outlining strategies for using aquatic and marine resources in a climate-smart, socially inclusive way with a focus on women, youth, and community-driven innovation. An audience of researchers, policy makers, practitioners, and development partners will bring immense value to today's discussion. And the collective expertise, knowledge, and voice, and insight and leadership in this forum can help guide the development of secure, sustainable pathways to resilient food systems. The World Aquaculture Society, what do you need to know about us? Oh no, sorry, there's some things that are blocking. Hide. Okay. The World Aquaculture Society is the living global organization in aquaculture, actively promoting the field. Our consistent goal is to promote sustainability and inclusivity by endorsing environmentally responsible aquaculture that preserve ecosystem and biodiversity. We strive to empower youth and women and marginalized communities, and we support food security and nutrition, promote economic development, and we advance science and innovation through research, technology transfer, and education to enhance aquaculture practices and results. The blue economy and Africa. Blue economy and ocean economy are interchangeably used, and they refer to economic activities in oceans, coastline lines that support ocean-based initiative. And the African Union defines it as a sustainable use of ocean and aquatic resources to promote economic growth, improve livelihood, and create jobs while protecting aquatic ecosystems. The blue economy offers transformative opportunities for African nations to sustainably utilize marine and aquatic resources for economic development, environmental conservation, and social inclusion. It has 5 priority areas: the fisheries and aquaculture, tourism, marine transportation, extraction of oil, gas, and minerals, and institutional governance, employment, job creation, and poverty reduction. Fisheries and aquaculture are crucial for global food security and nutrition, and more importantly in Africa than any other region of the world, because they provide major sources of animal protein and employment. Now, the blue economy and Africa are still on it. Fisheries and aquaculture play important roles in satisfying the global demand for fisheries products as the world population increases and fisheries stocks near the biological limits. Africa faces increasing population growth and food demand, while the supply of fish food from small-scale fisheries, that's artisanal fisheries and aquaculture, is threatened by climate change. The region, which includes 38 coastal countries, several island nations, and small island development states, are vulnerable to climate change and several weather events. And these regions are crucial for Africa because they offer opportunities in fisheries, aquaculture, including inland fisheries, coastal small-scale fisheries, mariculture, seaweed farming, aquatic ecosystem services, collectively providing nutrition, income, employment, and ecosystem benefits. The climate change affects food security by leading to loss of rural livelihood and income, harming marine and coastal ecosystems, disrupting inland freshwater ecosystems, and reducing terrestrial food production capacity. And the impact of climate change is influenced by ocean acidification, rising waters, and these exert pressures, more pressures than the existing pressures from overfishing, ecosystem degradation, which wasn't the effect of climate change, decreasing the chances that depleted stocks will recover from overexploitation. Declining catches, shifting fish stock distribution patterns, changing in aquaculture growing seasons, and rising coastal hazard will disproportionately impact communities, particularly women and youth. Now, what I've done in this presentation is to change the order a bit round, because in discussing the pathways, there's no way we will not discuss youth, and because of time factor, I moved the youth to the economic pathways that are already there, that people are already going into, because youth have that energy. In Africa, they have the energy, we have the number, and there is a set of group of people that we adopt and adapt innovations and easily try out things. So I moved the youth to the main pathways in Africa climate food future. We have modern fisheries and aquaculture are beyond harvesting and culturing fish in ponds and cages. It's now driven by technology, data, and knowledge. And youth-led innovations aim to connect Africans' potential with its future, in fisheries and aquaculture. And all the pathways that we have now, the climate smart aquaculture and sustainable fisheries, which includes the low input resilient aquaculture, the integrated multi-trophic systems, recirculating aquaculture system, aquaponics, reduce reliance on external sources, and boost resilience to temperature and water variability. Another climate smart one is ecosystem-based fisheries management, which uses catch limits, seasonal closures, community co-management, and habitat protection. This may not be practiced on a wide scale yet in all the countries, but we have seasonal closures in Ghana. We have community co-management being practiced in Liberia and in some part of Nigeria in the southwest area in Bayelsa, because of the opportunity that oil exploration provided for the community to become part of the management of whatever is going on in the waters around there. Then we have adaptive practices, early warning systems for extreme weather, stocking schedules, and selective breeding for thermal tolerance. For the early warning systems, we have farmers use their digital system, they use their phones, SMA, and also use radio jingles to tell each other about what is going to happen when there is going to be rain, when they should raise their dike, or whatever adaptation measures they should put in place. The sustainable solutions and coastal conservations that we have include the blue carbon ecosystem to restore and conserve mangroves and seagrasses and wetlands, and the hybrid infrastructure, which combines engineered solutions with natural buffer, where we have planting of mangroves plus breakwater to protect the coastal regions, and also to ensure that aquaculture ponds and dikes are not broken when there's ocean surge or flooding. We have the value chain development, processing, and cold chain. This is more of women smoking, solar drying. We get to that later. Coastal to reduce post-harvest losses and boost incomes. And we have market linkages and branding, which support community branding for sustainably harvested climate-smart aquaculture products, and markets to urban areas and the diaspora. And this is very important because I know that many African countries cannot export their aquaculture products for now, and we need to focus on that and see what we can do to ensure that policies are harmonized, and that with the importing countries, and that we can have the proof and evidence that these products have been sustainably produced and harvested. We also have the circular economy strategy that transform aquaculture waste into fertilizer, biogas, and under this we have the aquaponics system, which is being widely promoted by Stellenbosch University. And going to digitalization and innovation, which is where the youth have their strength, we have technologies that boost productivity, minimize losses, enhance overall decision-making efficiencies. And I've spoken about the use of mobile apps for farm management, extension services, weather alerts, and electronic catch documentation and traceability. And this is being used in Liberia. You have the system on small boats, artisanal boats, small-scale fisheries boats, and this helps to monitor what is going on to ensure and the safety of the fishermen at sea. And this is guaranteed that whatever is produced by the small-scale fisheries can also be exported to earn more foreign exchange for the fishermen and to improve their livelihood. We have the innovative financing and risk mitigation, different multi-level financing, grants, loans, capital financing, and insurance. Now, the blue economy pathways for African climate food future that is community-led innovation and social inclusions, where communities are custodians of aquatic resources, and their leadership ensures solutions are locally adapted and equitable. And we have the co-management models. I've already spoken about it being practiced widely in Liberia and in some parts of Nigeria, where we have shared governance, where communities co-design regulations, monitor resources, and receive benefits from restoration and blue carbon payment. But that does not mean that at the community level, they do not have their own management models in place wherein they manage themselves, they monitor what is going on at sea, they resolve conflicts among themselves where there's any conflict, especially where you have people who have set their nets and another fisherman goes there to either collect the fish illegally. They have a way of monitoring, they have a way of putting in mitigation measures. They have a way of enforcing it and of meting out punishment for whoever has erred within the community. We'll have the community enterprise models where we have producer cooperatives, community cold room, and shared processing facility to reduce cost. And I remember that in a community in Ibejuleki in Lagos State, because they were having issues of marketing their fish, and you have people come, middlemen, they will come and take the fish and go and sell at exorbitant prices. And at times, when they don't agree to prices, you have the fishermen burying their catches because they don't want to sell at the prices that is being offered to them. And what they now do was to have a cooperative setup, and they partnered with others, and they were able to build a cold room facility that has a processing facility at the back of it, which is managed by the community. And now what happens is that whatever is caught by the fishermen or whatever is produced in the community is sold strictly to the women in the community. And the women now can relax because they have a storage facility before selling it off. We also have participatory mapping and planning because fishermen, they go to sea, they were born into it, they know the fishing zones, the breeding grounds, nursery areas, and so are able to help with the local knowledge of even when to go to sea, when the sea, using the moon, and when the sea is safe, when you cannot go, and they protect their women. I was in a community and they will not let their women go to sea when it is very rough, aside from the cross-cultural norms in some community where women are not allowed to go to sea at all. Then the cultural and indigenous knowledge integration, incorporating traditional ecological knowledge in conservation and aquaculture practices. I've mentioned some about and using leaves to form cages, and when fish is plenty, they have a way of keeping the fish, using some local leaves to preserve them until there's scarcity of fish and they can now sell at higher prices. Now, opportunities for women. In Africa, the fisheries and aquaculture sector are valued at 24 million US dollars per year and employ over 12 million people. Of this workforce, 58% is said to work in fishing, while 42% are involved in processing, with women making 59% of the processing labor force. And this tells us something, that women's role in promoting economic inclusion is very important. Though they encounter a lot of systemic disadvantages in many ways, but their function is very essential, and data has backed up the fact that they are an important force that must be reckoned with in aquaculture and fisheries. In the fisheries value chain, it is said that 96% of the employment of women employment is in post-harvest activities like processing and trading. Now, the use of local indigenous knowledge for fish preservation by women is ingenious. They use local knowledge for disease control. They use it they use some leaves as tranquilizers when transporting live fish from one place to another. They have a way they cover this fish, and they will still be alive by the time they get to the market. And they have a way, even in aquaculture, that they cure their country tanks using palm oil, charcoal, and bitter leaf. all these indigenous knowledge are things that we need to leverage on and to document. Even in processing, we have women creating businesses focused on processing and distribution, often with a focus on food safety and value addition. And even in their systems, in their smoking kilns, they have introduced some innovation wherein they can reduce the smoke and they don't rely totally on wood and charcoal that leave soot hydrocarbons on their product. They use briquettes that are made from water hyacinth and other other plant products. Also, the homestead backyard fish farming is an innovation that has been successful, especially in urban areas in Nigeria. I know in some rural areas in other parts of Africa, but it's so successful because you can secure your fish. They can do other things in the home and still monitor what is going on with their fish in the backyard, and it provides an opportunity for them to improve their livelihood and earn a living. Community saving groups, women form groups, put resources together, is called by different names in different tribes and countries. And this collective action helps them to have a safety net. The gender inclusive microfinance too is the access to financial services is adapted to be more inclusive of women's need in the sector. And this is where the financial institutions come in. I know of a financial institution in Nigeria that is accepting jewelry from women as collateral because women do not, it's now changing, things are changing, but before women do not have land titles that were the main thing that is used to as collateral for loan. But now with innovations and with modernization, other things are accepted as collateral, and we have some financial models that we give loan even without collateral, using other factors to secure the loan for women and youth. We have cooperative associations, women form groups, and these are they share resources, they advocate their needs, and they're able to have a voice when they're in cooperative and other associations like the OfficeNet. They're able to speak to government, they're able to even talk on global levels within themselves, within country to country OfficeNet groups. And solar power systems, women are adopting and developing business strategies for new technologies such as solar power pumps, water recirculatory systems in hatchery, and to improve productivity and seed quality. Now, what are the interventions that we can have for women? Targeted finance and microcredit for women-led enterprises. If we have that we know it is for women. I know that AFTA has a number of innovations that they've done for women, specifically both on the regional level and on the continental level. But we are still waiting to see this have an impact that is visible on the women. A skill and entrepreneurship programs emphasizing processes, quality control, business management, and securing resource access by recognizing customary rights and securing tenure rights. Things are changing. Before, women don't have user rights in some coastal communities, but gradually with modernization, we are seeing that this is changing and women are getting some leverages here and there. But on leadership or governance, it is important to have quota and affirmative measures to ensure women participation in co-management committees in fisheries governance. And on the research level, on the higher level, we have some countries that recorded leadership for women to a large extent in research, it's there. But on the community level, we still need to do more work on that. And there's something that happened. I went to a community that were on the same coastline. One community, women were not allowed to go to sea at all. All they do is processing. And next to them, the next community, women were in leadership. Women were more vocal. Women were more seen. Women were recognized by the government in that particular community. So things are changing, and it's a mixed issue in different communities. Then gender-sensitive technology designs, we have tools and equipment that will be suited to women labor patterns, and we help because of time constraints. They have other things they do, take care of the family, the husband, the children. So they need something that is mobile, something that they can use conveniently. And this include energy efficiency dryers, small scale cold boxes. I have tried to rush through the presentation because there's so much to be said, but a healthy ocean is essential for transitioning to a sustainable blue economy, for reducing global warming and climate change. Supporting and harnessing Africa's sustainable blue economy involves more than just unlocking ocean resources. It is about protecting millions of livelihoods, especially women and youth, who are the vulnerable ones, who are the ones that are most affected if anything happens, and encouraging sustainable growth, ensuring food security, and building long-term resilience. Developing a sustainable blue economy requires more public support, increased private investment, especially in innovative solutions for sustainability. I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ariola, for such an insightful presentation. I think you really set the tone for what we are going to be discussing today, and we appreciate that you are able to be with us in this webinar. I'd also like to use this opportunity to introduce our panelists who are going to be joining President Ariola in the conversation. I will start with Anna Weeks, who is from the Conversation Africa. She is a environment and energy editor at the Conversation Africa, which is a website dedicated for academic research to a broader audience. And then we also have Phineas Dogoje, who is a development economist, a researcher and consultant with over 15 years of experience across Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Middle East. And then we also have Bernice McLean, who is from NEPAD, and she is a marine policy specialist with interest in sustainable fisheries management and aquaculture development and the contribution to food systems in blue economy. And then we also have Mary Jane Tyler Chimuka, who is the founder of the aquaculture unit at ARC and serves as manager for both the aquaculture unit and the ARC Biogas Center of Excellence, which is a leading expert in aquaculture and sustainable animal production. And to move on to the panel discussion, I'd like to start with a statistics from the World Economic Forum. It says that Sub-Saharan Africa stands at a critical crossroad with a population predicted to double by 2050. The region faces unprecedented challenges in achieving food security while confronting climate variability, degraded soils, and limited access to sustainable agricultural technology, as Madame Ariola has said. So I'd like to start with the first question of what are the biggest pressures that Africa is facing in food systems today, and how are they shaping the priorities for farmers, policymakers, and researchers? Anyone can take that question on. Anyone who'd like to speak on the challenges that we're facing in the food systems? Yes, Sophia, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. Well, in my work with farmers in different parts of Africa, we work with farmers in West Africa, East Africa, and South Africa. What we're finding is the common biggest threat is climate variability and rainfall. And it's not necessarily only drought, although drought is a big problem, but it's timing of drought, timing of rainfall. It's not as predictable. The weather is not as predictable. The rainfall is not as predictable as it used to be. And so farmers are having a lot of trouble making decisions about when to plant, how to plant. And when they have planted, most farmers still are dependent on rain-fed agriculture. And so that means that they don't have the backup of irrigation systems to help them if the rain is not coming when expected. And so then they rely on either manual irrigation or may lose their crops. So what we found is that is the biggest single critical factor for farmers in Africa. And following on that then would be information. And so this webinar is really important because we really need to get the scientific evidence of what's happening out there, but we also need to understand how we can get the right information to farmers so that they can deal with the impacts of climate. And while I have the microphone, I'd just like to congratulate the World Aquaculture Group for the work that you're doing on climate resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sophia. And I do apologize, I did not introduce you because I'm saving the best for last. And Sophia Hoya is from CGIAR Climate Research, and she's the founding executive director of the Women in Global Science and Technology. And she's also an expert in gender and STI, climate change, social inclusion, agriculture, and technology. And she's also a researcher in climate policy and agricultural development. Dr. Mary Jane, would you like to contribute to what Sophia
Yes.
said?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. To the audience and everybody, thank you for this opportunity. I will just say a little bit about South Africa. As Madam, I call him Madam President, he's my president of Aquaculture, has spoken. In South Africa, I think like in the whole world, the problem is that fish normally used to be, or in most countries like South Africa, we used to get more fish from the sea. But what is happening now, because of climate, there's less fish in the sea. And what is happening now is that we need to speed up and upgrade the farming, which is aquaculture, not fishing. But now, how do we speed up farming and increase food security for women? And I'm talking about women now. While we have a problem in South Africa, we have a very big problem of drought. Actually, we have extreme climates where we have got droughts, but also we have floods. So it's either we have too much rain, water, or we have no water. So what happened is that I think if most of you know about our former president, Jacob Zuma, he tried to introduce Operation Pakisa, which in Sotho means hurry up, looking at the Asian countries, how they increased their aquaculture. And it was to hurry, and as Madam Faluke has spoken about it now, you know, aquaculture is more growing in the world faster than other agricultural production. But now, how do we do it and introduce it to South Africa, where we have extreme temperature or climate, where we have too much rain and then there's drought, there's also drought. So what with those challenges that we have, and also we have a challenge of land, where there's already decreasing. If you go, I'm actually looking out through my window. I'm in Durban, but I'm working, I'm not on holiday. So if I look here, everywhere it's building in South Africa, where there's no more land to do farming. So now we need to come up with innovations and farming systems where we can do it in a way that there's no, we don't need land. Hence, if you look at the unit at the ARC, what we are doing very much, as I'm speaking now, my team is sitting outside. they are installing aquaponic farmers, so installing aquaponic systems to the farmers. That's why we are here, but we are also doing it in Gauteng. So we are trying now to come up with innovative systems where you need less land. As you know, aquaponics, I think we can talk later, but that's what we are trying to do to, to work for the farmers so that we are looking at the climate, that they are not affected by the climate change, especially in South Africa. Yes, I will leave that for later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Jane. And Sophia, you spoke about the importance of making the research accessible, and climate smart agriculture has been quite a buzzword, I think, in the past year or so, even though it's existed long before. So I was wondering if you could sort of define it for us in practical terms for farmers today, and how it differs from the farming systems that we might have either been practicing or know of in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, thank you. So that's actually a little bit more of a complicated question than you might think, because CSA has for quite a long time, and I think mostly outside of Africa, has had a bad reputation as being very technology-centric, very big corporate players run by very expensive agribusiness, so forth. But the way that we have been looking at it, and it's been defined by the FAO, by the Food and Agriculture Organization, as agriculture that addresses three issues. It addresses climate adaptation, climate mitigation, but also food security. And so it looks very much at, and I think in Africa, we have been very much taking the approach that it's how to help farmers adapt and adjust their farming and their aquaculture to the changes that climate is bringing about, as well as to promote food security and increase dietary diversity in the continent. And the way that I look at, I've been focusing on gender and social inclusion. So we have been expanding that approach to say that what's important for climate smart agriculture globally is that women are equipped and empowered to adapt and build their climate resilience, because they are the ones who very often feel the brunt of the climate impacts at the household and the farming level. They do not have the labor reducing technologies, so that if the crop is wiped out, they have to start all over again. They often do not have access to drip irrigation. So many, there's a big reliance on manual irrigation. They won't, and this also applies to youth and other kind of underrepresented groups, persons with disabilities, persons with HIV, disabled persons who will not have access to the resources they need to buy perhaps more drought-resistant seeds or to buy fertilizers or pesticides. And so this group is the group which is, a large group, is most impacted by these climate effects. And so climate smart agriculture, really to be smart and to be smart for women. And, we call it gender smart agriculture, but it also gender and social inclusion smart agriculture needs also to look at access to finance to buy these resources. It needs to empower women to be able to adapt quickly and respond quickly to changes in the weather, but also changes in the environment around them. And it needs to also decrease their workloads so that they are not the ones who are bearing the brunt of the impacts in the community. And it also needs to help them grow crops and livestock that are hardier, that can stand less, can thrive under lower water conditions, and that are more resistant to diseases. And so our approach has been to work with more indigenous varieties that may be somewhat improved for current conditions. So for example, in Ghana, we have been looking at dual purpose cowpea, which is not necessarily the market crop, but it's very nutritious, it's very hardy, and it's dual purpose in the sense that its leaves and stems and so forth can be used to feed cattle, livestock, because women manage the smaller livestock, goats and poultry. And we've also been looking at breeds of poultry and livestock, poultry and goats and so forth, that are more again, resistance, more able to handle tougher conditions as climate changes the environment.
Thank you, Sophia. I think you mentioned something very important in the beginning by saying it's a complex question because of the digital divide and the issue of access. And I actually it made me think of the climate smart framework, whether it's being adapted to indigenous ways of how we do it in Africa. So thank you for answering that question holistically. So there's also an issue besides the digital device, there's also an issue of access to information, and those who have access to information sometimes are not certain of whether this information is factual or not, which leads me to the next question for you, Anna, that in the age of misinformation, what role do trusted messengers and community leaders play in effective science communication through credible platforms such as the Conversation Africa?
Thanks, Sam. Well, I guess it's very important to communicate all scientific information, because scientific information is generally just completely out of the reach of anyone who's not a science. Even fellow academics don't tend to read or access science information if they're not scientists. So just communicating as a starting point is really important. And of course, people are more likely to believe scientific information when it does come from someone they know or respect or identify with. Community leaders, they'd obviously have a great advantage as science communicators, in that if they're trying out recommendations such as the dual purpose cowpea, we have a lot of stories about cowpea, well, a regular supply of them. So if community leaders are trying out information about climate smart crops, then they'd be able to demonstrate this in practice on a grassroots level, so which really supports the credibility of that research. So they'd be really good trusted messengers. What we find at the Conversation Africa, in trying to establish academics as trusted messengers, that highlighting their specific area of research expertise, the length of time that they've been immersed in researching a topic, is very useful. And we follow a kind of a communication formula where our articles always explain, how, where, and why the academics have conducted their study, so that people can see that they really do have genuine expertise, because this is key to building trust. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Dr. Mary Jane?
Thank you, Sam. You just reminded me last week at the South African, in South Africa hosted the National Science Forum, and ARC and Crane SA had a big session that we had about communication in science. And as you speak, Anna, you're just reminding me, where we were sitting down as scientists and trying to see whether we are doing a good job. For example, at ARC, we have so much information as researchers, like Sam has said, but does it get where it's supposed to get? Because at ARC, we do research and then we do development where we do farmers. But how do we package that information from the scientific world so that the farmers were sitting down and coming back at us that, we wanted to hear whether whatever we are doing, it's getting into them in the form, communication, just the way you talk, and somebody made a, sort of like started talking when he spoke in another, we have 11 languages and he spoke, and then all of us were like, what? He said, exactly, that's communication. We have 11 languages. Are we using that language that all the people in South Africa can be able to get that? And Dr. Chaminuka, who was the main important person that was speaking about this, came up with a conclusion that we need to work as different stakeholders, communicate, find ways. And we had our marketing people from ARC that were helping us with setting up everything. One of them said, hey, you scientists are not marketers, so you don't know how to communicate. Why don't we involve us? So it has to be a stakeholder part where different people at different level, they talk in a way that at the end, the message is understood by everybody. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Mary Jane, for contributing to that. So we've spoken about the adapting climate smart practices into indigenous ways and how to communicate it as well. And, you know, Dr. Mary Jane, you've also spoken about the multiple facets of research, but, you know, there's a governance that is needed, particularly in the emerging economy of aquaculture and fisheries, which we have coined blue economy. So I wanted to bring Bernice in and ask her that how increasingly important is policy areas and you know frameworks to protect and to create a sustainable circular economy for our oceans and coasts in the effort of bridging food security in Africa.
Thanks so much, Sam. I hope you can hear me okay. My apologies for the poor connection. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. You know, first to ask, you know, why have oceans and coasts become more important in terms of the food security agenda? So I think it's a number of things. We've been working certainly at the continental level to highlight the contribution of fisheries and aquaculture to Africa's food systems for almost 30 years. Say for 20 years, going into the next 10 years. And that's been through the sort of the continental programming through the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. And we've had very targeted policy interventions to try to increase the visibility and importance of the sector. I think it's known, you know, the facts are known that fish is very important for Africa. It's only been since 2014 when we did a study with FAO on the value of African fisheries that really highlighted the fact that fisheries and aquaculture contribute almost more than 6 times the amount that was originally anticipated in terms of the contribution to agricultural GDP. The problem has been really in terms of the policy frameworks is that fisheries and aquaculture are generally managed as a separate entity to agriculture. So you have different ministries, different institutional structures. And that communication that we've been talking about in terms of how we collaborate and coordinate as governments around Africa's food systems as a whole is really where the nub of the issue is here. So I think more recently, as you've mentioned, there's been more of a focus on the concept of blue economy, and that's looking at it from a very holistic perspective, from the perspective of it's not just fish, it's not just blue tourism, it's not just ports, but it's the holistic approach. And certainly from the continental level, the blue economy is noted within our continental development policy agenda 2063 as basically the new frontier for Africa's renaissance. That's the wording that's used. So really we're leveraging from the excitement around the economic development of the economy. Africa is a maritime continent. When we look at all 55 African countries, it's coastal countries, inland waters, they're all connected. And you can't look at things from an individualistic perspective anymore. The blue economy brings that approach of integration, of looking at sectors together and looking at planning with those sectors together. And I think what's happening again, apart from just looking at fisheries and aquaculture and the contribution to food security, we're really getting better at doing the research and naming the important sectors, not just from, okay, this is how much it contributes to GDP, but in terms of socioeconomic, in terms of cultural, in terms of livelihoods, food security. It's not just the the production levels, but it's actually how people access food on a continuous basis during times of stress and shocks. And I think aquatic foods and the fact that oceans and coasts produce healthy oceans and coasts produce that food security is really coming to the fore within the broader blue economy and food systems agenda. So a bit of a complicated answer, but I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yes, I think you set the foundation of the importance of policy and how it's implemented into real life. And speaking of real life and impact, now we're going to be moving to Phineas, who is going to be giving us a look into Tanzania's marine and aquatic landscape, which is at the heart of their economy, where it is driven by innovation, conservation, and international collaboration. So, Phineas, over to you on the adaptation stories of seaweed farmers in Tanzania.
Thank you, Salma and team. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So, as part of this webinar, I'm going to share some experience from Zanzibar, specifically focusing on empowering coastal economies. My recent research article or study I published with Elsevier. So I'm going to share some experience which will indeed build on the discussion we're having today. Now, so I'll be talking a bit about why coastal economies and aquaculture in general. So building on the president's keynote address, but again, focusing on women at frontiers of adaptation, but focusing on Zanzibar, but again, highlighting some key issues or barriers on participation in aquaculture, but focusing on seaweed. I'll try to share some examples from the current study. But again, I'll talk about climate change and cost of vulnerabilities and how the same affect women farmers who are participating in seaweed aquaculture, and then shed some light on political implications. So, as we've been talking about importance of aquaculture in general, so seaweed aquaculture is critical, in the marine value chain, and because it supports food value chain, food security, as well as livelihood, and also it's critical to climate resilience. And to focus on seaweed aquaculture, as like specifically the leading producers in the world are China, followed by Indonesia, South Korea, Philippines, including Zanzibar, which is in Tanzania. So China is taking over 55% of the production, while Zanzibar is part of production is less than 1%. But in Africa, I would say they are leading producers, followed by other countries like Madagascar, South Africa, who are also farming it in pockets. So seaweed is very critical, even globally. Over 40% of startups in seaweed in various aspects, ranging from production to value addition, accounts for over 40%. So this make it a critical or important segment of the aquaculture ecosystem. So now delving into Zanzibar, where this empirical study was conducted. So the study was conducted in Zanzibar, specifically in Unguja. So Zanzibar is an archipelago which is part of Tanzania, have two islands. So Zanzibar itself is called Unguja popularly, but we have another island called Pemba. So this study was undertaken in Unguja, which is part of the entire two archipelagos. So aquaculture, specifically seaweed in Zanzibar, supports over 25 farmers and directly, but also the other actors who are over 150 who are benefiting from this value chain, including those who are aggregators and all those who are involved from harvesting and so forth, and also supporting farming. So in terms of it's important as a sector, it's steady to tourism and clove as a source of income of the Zanzibar as a nation. But again, it accounts for over 90% of marine export for Zanzibar, and over 25% of exports for Zanzibar all. But what is very critical is that over 80% of the beneficiaries or persons who are engaging in this value chain are women. So that's why it is critical to start the participation of women and the significance on in the entire value chain. Now, so as women are in the forefront of this farming system, it's critical now they dominate the entire production system, but critically they remain constrained on they remain concentrated on the relatively lower value chain in a sense that most of the women farmers are engaged in production. But again, even though there is a lot of processing going on, the same is relatively at low scale, but mostly they are concentrated around production. But production on its own is high risk because it's at risk because seaweed is mostly farmed in Zanzibar, farmed at shallow waters. But again, for more productivity, farmers are required to go in deeper water or like deep sea for them to like farm and have like reliable production. But again, women are constrained to that because based on the culture, it's sometimes difficult for them to adapt. And indeed, the requirement to go to deep sea need skills, for example, diving skills. But again, capital is relatively high because you need to invest in some boats and some boats. So again, also for you to farm in deep sea. But also they have limited control over prices and assets because prices in Zanzibar are normally set by the government with limited inputs from farmers. So even though women are participating, but they have limited voices around pricing. But again, they are also affected by issues related to climate and climate and adaptation altogether, because climate variability also is confronting farmers, seaweed farmers who are like relying on shallow waters. So in shallow water, like climate issues are real. So because of rising temperatures, seaweed is significantly affected by diseases such as ice, which is very common. So again, that indeed confront women like to fully participate or meaningfully participate into like being into seaweed farming. Now, so the specific or key findings from the recent study I conducted in Zanzibar specifically highlight that access to finance, specifically finance for farming equipment and farming experience, influence significantly participation of farmers. So this means that so for farmers to have relatively high productivity, they need to invest into like have access to finance, but again, invest in relatively high technology or invest in equipments which are needed for them to farm. So as I said before, the key species in Zanzibar are spinosum and cotonou. So for example, cotonou is very vulnerable to climate change. So for you to have to do it in the deep sea, you need to invest. But women farmers are relatively affected by these by access to capital, which indeed translates into limited access to equipment. But again, the study found that age, so limit participation into seaweed farming. So you see, as women ages, they are likely constrained to participate in seaweed farming because seaweed on its own is capital intensive, is labor intensive. So well, elder farmers are relatively constrained to that. So this entails that specific intervention need to focus at empowering youth, women youth, so as to harness better into the entire ecosystem. Other factors were not significant in the context of Zanzibar. For example, education, market information access, and the marital status was not critical. But for example, issues related to market information was less important factor because the marketing system on its own, the prices are predetermined by the government. So perhaps that's why the same was not critical. But again, now focusing on now climate change and the cost of vulnerabilities now, as we see seaweed yields and farming are affected by rising temperatures and the changing of ocean conditions. So even site accessibility also are critical now issues to seaweed farming. So we see, for example, there's issues related to marine spatial planning, which is like a work in progress in Zanzibar, which I believe so is also the same in other sites. So there's issues related to conflicts of like investment, for example, for hotels and the farmers who are farming in shallow waters, and also farming into the deep sea. There are also issues related to like there are some areas which are excluded for farming and so forth. So this indeed affects farmers' participation with these issues related to rising temperatures. So temperatures are rising at the shallow waters, then farmers also having limited access to other areas to farm. So this indeed affects farmers. So even though the sector is like critical for most of the women, the climate change now is affecting the women farmers to harness better from this aspect. Now, so what are the critical recommendation or implication of what has been found of this study, and how can this build on whatever discussion we are having today and in general? So it's critical now to design a gender-sensitive financial inclusion. I recall Madam President mentioned about issues related to collaterals and so forth. So even in Zanzibar, the access to finance is critical and a challenge. So to sort it in Zanzibar and beyond, then gender-sensitive financial inclusion or programs are critical, and to ensure that farmers, women farmers have access to finance, and indeed invest into aquaculture and seaweed aquaculture and benefit from the same. But again, capacity building for young and new farmers. So even though the study indicates that like association of farming, seaweed farming participation is like farmers with relatively higher age less likely to engage in seaweed farming. Again, there is another challenge that youth are not interested in doing this because it's quite labor intensive, as I said before. But again, its proceeds from it is relatively limited. So again, to build capacity on farmers or youth farmers to engage in this, but again, by using modern technology to ensure that there is high productivity, which can indeed translate into higher margins and attract even youth to access or to join the seaweed farming. But again, there are issues related to institutional reforms, for example, access to resources, for example, spatial marine planning need to be at the forefront of whatever intervention can be thought, because much as we think of investing heavily in technologies, but how do we access the areas for us or for the farmers to farm or to practice their farming if there is no proper marine resource like planning. But again, issues like inclusive marine governance to align with other SDGs are very critical to ensure that like the agenda of inclusion is at the forefront of like the intervention we are going to plan like as Zanzibar and as a continent. So that was like a high level summary of what I found, and I believe this will contribute to today's discussion. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Phineas, for zooming into Tanzania and the possibilities there on aquaculture and fisheries. With that being said, we are moving back to the panel discussion. And what we're going to be tackling is policy frameworks and governance. So the Malabo Declaration on accelerated agricultural growth and transformation had a targeted deadline to achieve its set goal, such as eliminating hunger and halving poverty. None of the African Union member states were on track to meet the Malabo Declaration targets by 2025. And looking at the 4 core pillars of the CAADP, which include land and water management, market access, food supply, hunger reduction, agricultural research, and technology, which is most of what we've covered so far, what does the current landscape look like towards progress that Africa has made? And can you, Bernice, please tell us about the Kampala Declaration, which is the post-Malabo agenda, and how that is continuing to build the resilient and sustainable agri-food systems in Africa.
Thanks so much, Sam. Yeah, so as you said, yeah, the Malabo Declaration had some very strong objectives and targets. And over the last 10 years, we've worked very hard to try to assist member states to support them both to address the targets as well as to monitor the effectiveness of what they've been doing. through what we call the biennial review process, which is it's a monitoring and reporting process. That's really helped us in a very substantive way to understand that not only the progress of countries according to these objectives, but understand the issues and the challenges that they've been facing, and to really monitor how we are doing agriculture on the continent and what's needed. So Malabo was a very process-oriented 10-year stretch, focusing very much on putting systems in place, putting those reporting mechanisms in place, getting people trained up in terms of being able to look at the indicators and monitor them and report on them. And now we're at the stage through the process that we went through last year to look at what's needed now in the post-Malabo agenda, which has now been taken up into the Kampala Declaration, as you said. The next 10 years, the Kampala Strategy and Action Plan, really to take a more comprehensive look at food systems. So we've moved from agriculture to agri-food systems, looking at a very broad perspective of the comprehensive suite of value chains, but also to move a little bit further in terms of specific value chains and looking at the food systems as a whole, and the contribution to economic and social development. So that's the big change, looking at agri-food systems as a whole. And then also focusing now specifically on implementation. So for instance, within ADONEPAD, together with the AUC, we are focusing very much on readiness and supporting countries to be ready to hit the ground running and really start implementing. So this means, how do you actually translate what's happening from the continental policy frameworks right down to the regional frameworks from our regional economic communities, and then within the member states themselves? Now, we do this through a process of the National and Regional Agri-Food Systems Investment Plans, the NIPes, they're now called NASIPs, and the RASIPs. And basically, those are an articulation of countries' priorities within the response to previously Malabo and now to Kampala. So countries are in the process of adjusting their existing agri-food systems investment plans and really taking this broad food systems approach and looking at the Kampala strategy. The Kampala strategy itself has not only a very comprehensive approach. It's got a number of strategic investment areas or strategic target areas. But because the Kampala agenda was developed in a very comprehensive, inclusive, and let's say adaptive way, it really manages to articulate not only the government's priorities, but also the farmers, civil society, etc. So we have, as I said, 6 main strategic objectives, looking at ranging from looking at intensifying agro-industrialization and trade. The second one is around boosting investment and financing, so a very strong focus on financing. The third strategic objective, looking at food security and nutrition across the continent. The fourth one is around inclusivity and equitable livelihoods. The fifth one around building resilient agri-food systems, which is probably most important what we're talking here today. And then the sixth one is around strengthening the governance of things. Just to mention, in terms of the blue foods or aquatic foods, which is what I'll bring to the fore here. This is for the first time been really strategically articulated within Kampala. As I've mentioned in my previous intervention, we worked for a very long time to try to get fisheries and aquaculture specifically within the Malabo agenda. working to try and get it into the National Agri-Food Systems Investment Plans as an added extra, because there wasn't such a focus on specific sectoral interventions within Malabo. It was more about the broad agricultural sort of governance structures in the process. But now, as we're focusing in on Kampala, we have specific strategic objectives on aquatic production systems. And we have, I think it's 8 key targets for aquatic production systems, ranging from, again, providing training for small-scale aquaculture producers, to promoting holistic approaches to food production that link terrestrial agriculture and aquaculture and fisheries, strengthening their resilience and promoting sustainable financial mechanisms and investment. So you can see a very strong focus on private sector development, finance and investment. Looking at strengthening capacities for aquatic biodiversity conservation. So noticing that the resource base itself is critical, and having a healthy resource base to be able to continue to have a sustainable food production, so food production sustainability over the long term. Then the last 4 are around integrating sustainable fisheries and aquaculture into value chains at the local and global levels. Looking at adopting a science-based management practice approach. We have been doing this before, but are we getting better at focusing on data collection, management, analysis, and then using that for evidence-based decision making. Investing in sustainable science-based production. And then the last one is around improving governance and the sustainable management of small-scale fisheries, which, as we know, in Africa is very, very important. Small-scale fisheries contribute the majority of food security and nutrition from our inland waters. So yeah, I think as a whole, we are moving much more into impact-driven implementation for the cadet program, and putting a lot of focus on member states to help them to be ready to implement, and shifting a little bit further from the process now to implementation.
Thank you, Bernice. Sophia, would you like to touch on the small holding of farming? You recently published an article that was focusing on the gender empowerment through a new path of resilience in the private sector and academia, and you AICCRA, I'm avoiding not to say Accra. You'll correct me. There you did a gender review of social inclusion in the 6 countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Mali, Senegal, and Zambia. So I really would love to kind of hear on that in continuation to what Bernice was saying of, you know, the importance of small-scale farming and holding as well, and the importance of that sector.
Okay, yeah. So what we've been looking at is what we call CSA bundle. And so what it is the core is the CSA crop or livestock, or, you know, like dual purpose cowpea, or community-based breeding programs, where farmers are taught improved methods of feeding and management of livestock. And then we place them in the middle of a set of technical, financial, capacity building support services for the farmer, so that they can, so it could be about access to markets. Primarily, we have been looking at local markets, but I think that, you know, the connection to the larger scale through digital or farmers associations. For example, in Zambia, they have been working with the National Farmers Producer Association called the Chitetewo Foundation, the cooperative. And so to connect up to different ways of expanding the reach and the product of your product through that's one way. The other way is to access finance. And at this point, I see a real need for countries as well as the global climate community to understand the financial needs of farmers for climate resilience. They are not, climate finance is still not getting down to the local levels, not getting into the rural areas. And what we're finding is for farmers to be able to access some of the improved inputs and resources is they are forming local community collectives and savings and loans associations and so forth, but there's still a big jump for them to access money externally. One of the other things we've been doing is looking at investment from the private sector. And so, for example, in Senegal, we've had an initiative to work with women and youth-run livelihood businesses and try to connect them up with investors. And so that has had some good results, but it's still mixed results because the whole idea of investing in local, small-scale, farmer-run associations is still not well advanced. We have found that working with groups of farmers has been the most effective. So in Zambia, we have the Umbrella Association that connects all the cooperatives, and they've been able to work on leadership, capacity development, and connections to markets. In Mali, a group called the Africa Rice Group has worked with women's associations to process rice in different ways that's more environmental, increases the quality of the product, is more nutritious, and more desirable in the marketplace, so that now these associations, they call the Women's Parboiler Association, so they parboil the rice, are producing rice, actually more than just parboiling the rice. Now they are more than doing that. They're doing more than that. They are processing, crispy rice, like we call it Rice Krispies in Canada and the US. And so which I eat, like whenever I get access to them, I just eat them out of my hand. They're so good. And, couscous, rice-based couscous. They sell mixes of rice with different vegetables so that you have a take-home meal. So they're really diversifying the products that are available and the packaging, managing all of that themselves with support, of course, and really turning into viable local-based businesses. So there are different models for this. And I think the role for, communication and academia is to act partly as intermediaries to communicate the successful cases, both in research journals, but also in more publicly accessible communication formats to let people know what works. But the gap we still have is this connection between the private sector and the development activity, the best case models. And I think that's a real role for regional and sub-regional organizations to do this, like Cardessa and CORAF and all of these big regional and sub-regional African associations. And, it looks like the World Aquaculture Research Council is doing work on that as well. And so I think that's a role for the regional organizations to promote. Academics can't do it by themselves, but academics and researchers can do the packaging and do the analysis of what is working and what is not working, and identify the priority and most potential areas of success. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. And my next question is for President Ariola and Mary Jane. Sophia actually touched upon it about the collaboration of the private sector with the public sector. And I think, President Ariola, you kind of stand at the middle center of these kind of two sectors. Could you please expand on what opportunities are there, or what initiatives is World Aquaculture Society or the Fisheries Ministry that you are a part of? And also, Dr. Mary Jane, you could perhaps touch in the regional aspect of private and public sector collaboration between the ARC. Or by the ARC, rather.
Thank you very much. Having worked with government for many years and also in the private sector, It's giving me an opportunity to know the sort of partnership that you can have between the public and the private sector. In Nigeria, for instance, if you belong to a particular sector, a producers group, government makes it mandatory that you must have an association that relates with government. It is through that association that you have meetings with government. It is through that association that government also supply inputs. If there are inputs, if there are things to be done for that particular sector, like the rice sector, the fish sector. Even in the fish sector, is broken down to catfish, to tilapia, and also to processing and different groups. So if you don't belong to any of those associations, you cannot access whatever government support it is that is going to that sector. And aside from that, in research, what I found out is that most research work are on the shelf. They are not being used by farmers. And so farmers are reacting. When researchers go to the field, farmers are saying, you come all the time, you take our data and we don't get anything back. Though it's like a negative thing in that some farmers now are capitalizing on it to make money, not seeing the good in that research work. I think more needs to be done in the area of research for enlightenment, to make the farmers know that whatever data, which is what we are doing as World Aquaculture Society on the country to country, we have regional groups, West Africa, Central, and so on. Our regional directors is one of the things I think they are doing well in trying to educate our farmers that if you don't give data, we cannot plan, we need to plan and that. And then the farmers now are also, on the other hand, telling researchers that your research work should not be the laboratory one alone. You should tell us what these are the areas where we need information in the area of feed to reduce cost of feed, how to access international markets. What do you do about quality control issues? What do we have to do to ensure that our products can go out? So there's a need. None of them can work on their own because the government is regulating only. The government is not producing in most African countries. And if you are not producing, the person you are regulating must know what you are doing. So the two of them need each other. And the producers, for instance, cannot harmonize with another country. They have to go through the government for any equivalence program or harmonization program. You need the government to do that. It's government to government. So there is the need for everybody to identify their roles. Let the government identify what are our roles: regulatory, policy, policy formation, policy implementation, monitoring and control, price, whatever. And then the private sector too should identify what roles they have to play. And there are different types of private sector. The financial institute, what are we to do? Must we have a desk in the bank that is strictly for agricultural issues and challenges, how to meet the challenges? They need the understanding. What I found that even for financial programs that they have, the banks do not have the understanding. Like you give a loan, you want to give 30% at this time, 30% at that time. It does not work. There's a need to understand growing season, when the farmers need money, how the money can come. It's not for the financial institution to say, this is how we program, without taking into consideration growing season, all the things that has to do with the system or the crop or the fisheries that is in question. And then government, research, there are different types of private sector. All of them needs to identify their roles, and there must be a meeting point. There's a need to have meetings regularly to see how everyone is doing. There must be measurable indices to see what is happening in the partnership. Thank you. Mary Jane?
Thank you. Sam, you have touched on something very important. You know, as scientists, we like to work in silos, even not going even into private and government. I think as human beings, we like silos. You know, it's my space and I go up wherever. But what we are trying to see even at the ARC now, but also at the level of the World Aquaculture Society, and also at the level of African chapter there, we are trying to work across, you know, across the multidiscipline. I'll give you an example that I'm working. All my projects now include policy, you know, because as Dr. Benis was saying, South Africa, we have got very good policies. Our government, I went to China once for training, and the Chinese told me, you are the best country that has policies. But these policies tend to be, you know, to put too much red tape, you know. But now we need, you know, we need to work with FANAPEN. It's not a private company, you know. So every project that I do, I make sure that there's policies that will be used, because it's important that the government and the private sectors work together and the policies are in to make life easy. Also, one thing that I'm doing besides working with the private, I work very, very connected in aquaponics. You know, we work with private sector because we have engineers, we have private companies, and there's funding that, for example, we apply for which one implementation of, for example, commercial farmers. Most commercial farmers, they are private. So I work in aquaponics, I work very close with commercial farmers. And it's very important. I have another head, not in aquaculture, which is a very important part in South Africa of, as we know, we had load shedding, where we have a problem of energy, where even to run our pumps in aquaculture, it's an innovation in aquaponics we need. You can't run aquaculture, especially recirculating systems, if you don't have electricity. And we had a problem of load shedding, you know, and many farmers had a problem. So what are we doing now? We are connecting with, I wear another hat, which you said, with SABIA, South African Association of Biogas, where we are going to make sure that now we look into energy so that the farmers can have can use you know, biogas, renewable energy, or waste to produce biogas. There's a very nice demonstration that we have at the ARC now, where we have aquaculture, we have biogas, and we are going to, in few months, I'm sure that we will have aquaponics that are run by biogas. So, but Sabia, it's more a, you know, it's an industry and it's private. So it's very important to work across with private sectors, especially in the energy and aquaculture. There are sections that have very big problems and they need to work with private sectors, as I say. So like I was saying, I think it's very important to stop working in silos. Government must work with private sectors, because, you know, there is a synergy when we work together. Like I say, also, most of my project, I do socio-economic factors, where I look at we normally work and we look at aquaculture, or we look at whatever, we forget how the farmers, and how to go and speak to the farmers and look at the socio-economic factors. I also work with economists. So what I'm trying to say is that, like I said, in that communication meeting, there need to be many stakeholders and look at different, you know, sides. To finish up, I will say I sometimes sit in funding like NRF, where I'm a reviewer. And lately in South Africa, all funders look for multidiscipline project, government, you know, and private partnership. We have seen that gone are those days where one person thinks that he's a jack of all trades, he can do everything. Never, because we are wasting money and we are not being productive to come. And the government now, when they fund, they will tell you, we can't fund another social sociology. You need to bring everything together in one project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Jane, for talking about the importance of cross collaboration. And before we hand over to Anna, I wanted to ask one final question, perhaps for anyone who wants to chip in, but mostly for Sophia and Bernice. Are there any incentives for the collaborating with the private sector, whether it be from government or be from your representative affiliation? Are there any that you can share that advocate for women empowerment within climate smart food system practices?
I'll start. That's a good question. There are not a lot. But there are some good models. The World Bank and the IFC have been very much promoting women's entrepreneurship and women's climate-based entrepreneurship as well. The IFC has a big fund for investing in women's enterprises, and a certain percentage of those are intended to go to climate-related enterprises. So that's something I think that's worth looking into and perhaps copying as a model. And the idea of gender lens investing has kind of taken hold. And some of those organizations that are promoting that are looking at climate-related issues. The problem is that gender lens investing, if not focused properly, tends to focus on medium and larger enterprises, and still doesn't necessarily reach women at the grassroots, at the community level, because those are tiny enterprises. And what you often find at that level is a lot of training is required and a lot of capacity development around business management and interaction with, and then helping them source suppliers as well as markets. It's very complex, and done at the small scale is very time consuming. It looks very complicated. So that's one problem. But there are examples such as the Women Investment Committee in Senegal, which does highlight investment in women-run enterprises. But again, the issue is there needs to be much better connection between capacity development for women and youth-run enterprises with the private sector. And that could be a role for academia and for communications, as well as for business specialists. I just had an example of how that could be done, and I kind of lost it. But yes, I was going to talk about actually work of one of our ACRA members, the International Livestock Research Institute, did some work on youth dairy-based enterprises. And basically, often it's, youth delivering milk. And, so the question is, how do you get that kind of training to the youth so that they can run successful enterprises? And how do you notch it up so that it's not just milk, but perhaps we're talking about yogurt production. Perhaps we're talking about cheese production. Perhaps we're kind of adding value. And, the problem, of course, with dairy is that it's very, very spoilable. And so you need the proper facilities for cooling and storage as well as for processing. So, the comment that I can make is, I'm not a private sector specialist, but from what I see is that it really needs to happen more. But it's an opportunity. It's a small scale opportunity, but it's an opportunity. I think the mobile companies have seen that people at the local level are a huge, huge market, right, for mobile phones. And, in the old days, I was around the gender and ICT, when ICT was a big deal. And we were always talking about, the how do you get to the bottom of the pyramid? How do you get companies interested in the bottom of the pyramid? And they've done it, right? The mobile services have taken over in Africa, and the mobile companies are benefiting from that. So how do you make that kind of transition and get the private sector to understand the value of working at the community level and the smaller scale enterprises as well, and the benefits that they can get in terms of, maybe smaller smaller increments of product, pay-as-you-go. So we found solar irrigation, that pay-as-you-go is a really, really viable model for access to solar irrigation by small farmers, small-scale farming. Both women and men are able to take advantage of that. So we need to kind of shift the models so that the private sector understands the value of investing, but can also understand the market that exists there if they're just a little more flexible. Thanks.
Thank you, Sophia. Bernice?
Thanks. Yeah, I won't take up too much more time after Sophia. I think just to mention that so the private sector in Africa, we always talk about them as, private sector investment, but we are getting better at knowing that the private sector comprises 90% of micro, small, medium enterprises. And so we're looking more from the policy space at how do we grow the private sector, not just necessarily how do we draw down from the private sector in terms of investment and finance, but how do we provide support to grow the private sector. Now, in terms of providing a gender lens, on that particular policy priority, it's been extremely important, specifically within the blue economy space, to have an idea or to understand the role of women and the potential role of women and the opportunities for women moving into traditionally gendered spaces, whether it's maritime transport and trade, port development, oil and gas, with those big economic sectors, and not just within one small sector of, for example, processing of fisheries. So I think the incentives need to be based on evidence of basically what women can do, as well as the barriers facing women. So we look at, supporting interregional trade and the issues and the challenges facing women within the trade space, non-tariff barriers to trade, and the safety and security and the lack of infrastructure that are available to them, services and so on that are unique to addressing women's challenges. And I think what has helped over the last little while, certainly within the policy space, is to really provide an enabling environment for women business owners and champions to have a voice in that space. We're doing this through, for example, supporting, one of the examples is the Women Fish Processors and Traders Network that's been recognized by the African Union and really supported to establish that on a continental scale. And helping women to organize, to get visibility, and really just do their business, and have a voice in the policymaking space really leads to both incentives and addressing, issues around risk in terms of financing and loans, and tackling the incorrect assumptions that are associated with women businesses. So I think that's the sort of the approach that we're trying to take is looking at establishing more of an enabling environment, raising the visibility of women's voices and women's issues, and then providing support for them to really just do their business and provide an indication of what can be done and opportunities available to investors in that space. So
Thank you, Bernice. I think we can all agree that access is a core priority, whether it is through technology, whether it is through the knowledge capacity building, or finance. And I think the first step is knowledge empowerment, and how we can transfer this knowledge that sits in these, I call them academic bubbles, and beyond, of course, the publishing avenues such as publishers, to the people who actually need this knowledge. And with that being said, I'd like to introduce my next speaker who's going to give us a presentation on the importance of science communication and how it is beneficial for policy making, but also for the end user who can implement this knowledge. Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Greetings to everyone and greetings to all the attendees. Let me just share my screen. Can anyone see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation, but it's not in presenter mode.
Should I try and put it into presenter mode? Sometimes it has a few issues. Is it in presenter mode now?
Yes, we can see clearly.
Great. Okay. Great, everyone. I think I might have to speed through this quite fast. So please take down my email address. And if you want a copy of the presentation, I'll just email it to you later today. So I work at the Conversation Africa, editing the Environment, Energy and Climate page. It covers the whole continent, and this is just what it looks like when you log onto it or you click onto it. So the website address at the top. And then we have all of those sections, climate, business and economy, and so on. So we cover a lot of agricultural stories. They fall within the business and economy, climate and environment and energy pages. Sam, is my screen moving forward?
Yes, it is moving forward.
Sorry, I was just checking that it's working. So basically, the Conversation Africa is an independent, not-for-profit source of news and analysis. We're quite dedicated to academics. We only really publish academics, but having said that, if you've left the academy and you're working in the private sector or the non-profit sector, you can always author an article together with an academic, and then we would mention your name as an author in the body of the article. And we're part of a big global network of 10 sister sites all over the world, and all our articles are published under Creative Commons license, which means that any news website can pick them up and republish them, which is really good. So, for example, all of our articles get republished by one or other of the news sites. I don't think we've had an article that hasn't been republished, and that really increases our reach to a general public audience. We have about 1.6 million readers per month. So it is quite a big reach. So I'll just highlight some of the examples of the stories we cover. And here you can see on the next page. So what we do is we as editors work with academics to translate complex work, typically journal articles, sometimes even PhD theses, sometimes policy documents as well. And so we basically convert these into everyday English without any jargon. So no terms that only people in your field will know and that an everyday newspaper reader wouldn't understand. We convert all of those. That helps us and you reach far more people. We reach quite a few people in government and policy leaders, business people, other lecturers, not just fellow academics. And so in agriculture, we cover the full range of agriculture and land topics from every country in Africa. We don't say, no, we'll only cover this topic and not that topic. I'll go through this very fast because I'm not sure how many of the attendees are academics, but basically you can publish with us if you have at least a master's degree and 5 years of experience teaching or researching, and you have to be based in a university or an accredited research institution. So the accredited research institutions, we have a long list, so I wouldn't be able to tell you all of them now, but I know CGIAR is one, ARC is one, HSRC is one in South Africa, and there are a number of research institutions accredited across the world. And we do also accept articles from PhD candidates as long as they're writing on the topic of their thesis. once data collection is complete. And so why we have these rather strict criteria is because we really do want to be a credible voice. And so we would only publish people writing on their specific area of expertise, because that builds trust with the readers. And so this is comes back to what we've been talking about in this webinar. Publishing an accessible version of your journal research or your PhD connects you directly with the public, with key decision makers, and it extends your influence out beyond academia or beyond your network of organizations. The people who write for us have complete control over the article. We have a platform that we co-edit on. So every edit that I make as an editor, the author can see and agree with or disagree with. And then they have to give formal approval for the article to be published as well. So quite a few times we have authors whose research is about to be published. They know the date that it will be published in the journal, and then they work with us on an article so that we can publish on the same day and increase the reach and impact. And these are some of our examples, just from basically the last few months on agriculture. So we publish new research, news analysis. So you'll see the G20 stories. We had a lot of analysis on that. Then we publish Q&As. Those are very popular, where we will unpack a subject, and explainers as well. And here are some of the stories. It's really great to have so much research into grassroots agriculture and climate adaptation issues these days. Lots of academics are doing this research, and we find it's very popular, and of course it's very valuable, because then lessons can be learned from small rural areas that are quite out of the way, and that don't normally get much coverage in the mainstream media. So we do quite a bit on women in agriculture. This is just an example of one of the stories that was published recently, a study into rural women farmers in the Eastern Cape who had been brought into a citrus project, and then how there were certain challenges that they faced even after they'd been brought into the project, and what could be done better in future. So this applies if you're not planning to write for the conversation. This is a general kind of picture of what you should do if you want to communicate your research for any other publication. So I know lots of you often write probably for the Mail and Guardian or News 24. You follow the same procedures really, because at the end of the day, you're taking, a 5,000 word or 8,000 word piece of research, and you're condensing it right down to 700 or 800 words. And, when you're writing for newspapers, you have to do that before the editors will even take a look at it. At the conversation, it's slightly different because we do ask you to come up with an 800 word draft, but we'll work with you on refining that further. So the main things you should focus on are what's the story. So that's in a very, very tiny nutshell. So that's mainly your conclusions or findings. What do you want the reader to take away, and be very specific. And then what we ask our authors to write about is, why should the reader care? Imagine somebody who's never ever heard of your field of research ever. They don't have any prior knowledge of it. What are you going to say to make them care about your area of research? And then you just explain, why now? Why is your topic relevant? So we do feature quite a few Indigenous knowledge systems articles. Of course, those are highly relevant now in terms of climate change. So that then qualifies under the why now point. And then the last thing, we ask people to explain is, why are you the best person to write about this? What expertise informs your view? In other words, what gap in the research have you filled and your prior background in that. This is just an example of, here's a journal article at the top. This journal article eventually became the article you see at the bottom. Okay, so we literally work with the author of the journal article to produce the popular version below. And this is Prof. Mazenda's dashboard. Each author gets a dashboard. So I just wanted to show you his, because he's written a number of stories for us over the years. You can see them on the side, and you can see that all in all, well, he's actually only been writing for 1 year, but all of his 4 stories that he's written for us, he's written 9, sorry, over the years have attracted 66,461 reads. So that's quite nice for academics, because we know some academic journal articles get very few reads for a number of reasons, especially including the cost of accessing them, and the public just don't pay for them. So this is really quite a big widening of the audience. And now I'll take you through one story. It was about drought and farming, how women in South Africa are using indigenous knowledge to cope. It was by an academic at the University UniZulu, and we published it in January this year. So I'll just take you through very briefly so you know how we convert research. So what you see on the side is the headline and the author's banner photo. And then I'll go through the steps. So first of all, you would summarize what your research is about. Now, if you look at this paragraph, this is how the author summarized it. So very briefly, and you'll see we link to everything so that people who don't know what an indigenous knowledge system is, they can just click on that, and it will take them to an explainer. Every time there's a statement of fact, so Mkhanya Kudye district municipality has an unemployment rate of 37.7%. We link to research that states that. So that, again, we build the credibility of the story. So from that first summary, you would, as an author, state your expertise. So you'll see this academic and her co-author are geographers who research climate change adaptation and indigenous knowledge system. And then they set out how they conducted the research. So this essentially is the methodology, but summarized into one sentence. And then the findings below that summarized into one sentence. So it's really a condensation of your research. And then we like the authors to bring in the voices of participants in the research. So this research interviewed women small-scale farmers, and they actually looked back on all the droughts they had experienced over the past 39 years and the effects of those. And then we moved to point 4 is the solutions, a solutions kind of topic. We call it what needs to happen next. So that's where the authors will highlight in more detail the findings. So the key finding is that indigenous knowledge systems must be recognized, and then the author would really expand on that below, saying what the government needs to do, what people who finance climate adaptation needs to do, what development financiers need to do, and what needs to happen to empower small-scale farmers to preserve and transfer indigenous knowledge more. So that's really the kind of just the rough format of most of our articles. We work with authors to get articles into that shape. So the author of this article was Jabulile Mzimela, a lecturer in human geography at UniZulu. And you'll see that article was actually very popular. On its own, it got 10,479 reads. And you can see the different countries where the readers were based on the side. So yeah, every author gets a dashboard so that they can also track their articles and see the impact that they're having. And of course, if you work for a university, some universities do like to get this feedback from you, and they take it into account. I know certain universities have said when lecturers are applying to be promoted from lecturer to senior lecturer, senior lecturer to associate professor. They do take these kind of articles into account. Not all universities do that though. So when you're doing science communication, whether you're writing for The Conversation or for News 24, Daily Maverick, or any other platform, there's a few things to focus on. The research, so you must have an angle, it should be something new. It should have a hook to hook the reader in, and give just enough background and context, but don't overwhelm the reader with thousands of words of context because they just won't read it. And then, of course, we talk about maintaining a golden thread, the importance of that, keeping on, continuing to return to your core argument the whole time. Things to avoid, any jargon that is specific to your industry or your field of research, because you may have become very used to that jargon, but we can guarantee you that people out there won't know it unless they're really close to your industry themselves. And that's when you're writing a popular article for any news website, you should just assume that most people out there, if you're looking at getting 10,000 or 50,000 readers, very few of those readers are going to be people that understand the jargon in your specific field. And then we also take out all acronyms. So, the WEF or the, any acronym really. We take all of those out because we find that the readers switch off if they see an article that's full of acronyms because they have to first absorb each and every acronym and understand, kind of what it means. And then an over formal tone, the tone that you would use in a research article. We don't use that. We use an everyday tone, quite approachable. It's a different format to writing an academic essay, but we would assist with reformatting. We don't expect authors to make that switch from academic writing to popular writing. We don't use rhetorical questions because it's all about explaining your research, what you've done, what you found out, and why it matters. And then long sentences, well, we have an algorithm that assists, and it basically says that sentences should be no longer than 17 words each because those are much more accessible. So this is just a bit about The Conversation. We've got 900 media outlets that we publish. In the last 10 years, we've published over 12,300 articles from almost 8,000 authors. Some people co-author, and we have 4 country offices around the continent. Okay, and these are the same kind of stats. I won't go through them all. 600,000 readers monthly. Oh, and this is just to tell you briefly about the republishing. So these are some of the websites that republish our articles, and they get republished all over the world. We had an article that got read 500,000 times on the independent newspaper website in the UK. It was about rooibos tea farming. So these republishers pick up the articles. They aren't allowed to change anything at all. So you can rest assured that your article won't be altered. Who reads us and why? We've done some annual reader surveys. So people who want to get expert opinions and facts, to find news they can't find anywhere else, to learn about issues that interest them, and to get some insights into the world around them. And the next slide, I think, is more interesting because this is what you were looking at earlier, the impact of your articles. So you can see 13% of our authors are contacted by government or policymakers, and others are contacted 7% by business. Lots of our authors are contacted by the media for interviews on radio and TV and so on. 7% have even been asked to contribute submissions to Parliament. And this one might be of interest. 27% of our authors have used the conversation metrics for their articles in funding or grant applications. So I think I've come to the end of the slides now. I know that was a bit quick, but I felt like we were running out of time. Oh, we've gone over time, but feel free to email me with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We are indeed running out of time. It was such a privilege to be a part of this conversation. Anna, do you mind switching off your screen share? Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So we've reached the end, and I would like to ask all my panelists one question before we close and just if all could like briefly answer it in 40 seconds, I'd appreciate it. And it's looking ahead at 2030 and beyond, what role should African institutions, researchers, publishers, and communities play in shaping global food system debates? So you can choose one out of the four that I mentioned, or if you want to leave a parting message, that would be wonderful too. A message to give women hope.
I think I'll leave it up to the scientists because I'm a communication person, so they have got the better advice. Thanks.
But what would you, from your editorial perspective, would like to part us with, if I can adapt the question for you?
Maybe just to say to everyone attending and all the panelists, just contact us and try to write as much as you can in terms of popular articles, accessible articles, because those reads are really important. You know, you might get an article that you submit to News 24 or The Conversation that gets 10,000 reads, but the impact will spread out far beyond that, because then from that you could get a radio interview on a station that has, 50,000 listeners. It will be, retweeted by people and put onto socials. So don't see it as a burden. Reach out to any science communicators, especially from nonprofits like us, because we're here to be of service to you and the readers. And we gladly welcome any approaches. And we also do have a partnership with Taylor and Francis, which is good. So we do go through all Taylor and Francis journals regularly and try and pick up. We proactively look for research as well. So you might find us contacting you in the near future. Thank you.
Anna says knowledge is power. Phineas?
I think sustainable adoption of technology will be critical to shaping the future food system, like in Africa and beyond.
And I mean, Anna. Phineas says, let's get digital. Madam Faluke, would you like to inspire women who want to become like you in the near future with some parting words?
Well, the thing is, I believe so much in mentorship relationship. You must have somebody you are looking up to, and you must also give back to the society by being a mentee by being a mentor to other people. And I also believe that it is important to establish strong linkages between the public sector, the private sector, because that's how we can actually move forward. There's no particular sector that can work on its own. Like Mary Jane kept on saying, you cannot be in silos. That used to be the thing with researchers before. They hide their research works. But now there's a need, and that's where we come in as World Aquaculture Society. When we have our conferences, we bring people together so that they can interact, they can collaborate, they can exchange ideas and information. And that's where we're promoting growth in the aquaculture space, and also for the food system in future. It is needed in all the sectors to have collaboration between the public and the private sector, understanding the needs of each sector and working towards each other to give and take, and so come to an agreement that will work for the development of the sector. And so for women, well, you have to work hard, you have to be positive to know that you will get there. That is it, and you will see it happen. And so for younger ones, they should work hard, they should look up to people, and they should be ready to get there, because the sky is not the limit. Thank you.
It's not the limit. That's great. I like that one. President Faluke says, giving is receiving. Mary Jane, please go ahead.
My president, Madam President, just took my words. But what I want to say here is that climate change, I would say it's an enemy, and it brings us all, whether it's aquaculture, it's energy, it's whatever field. And we have to think about it, and it's something, it's not impossible as long as we work together, age or across. So we just need to keep on as women, helping each other, holding hands together. And, you know, the young ones, you see us, we are very old. We have to help those young ones, and they have to, I don't know, okay. They have to, we have to mentor them and come back, and nothing is impossible, you know, for those young people. We have been where they were, and we can reach somewhere far. And I'm happy about this opportunity of having people in different sides, and whether it's policy, government. And I really want to thank everybody for attending this. And I'm hoping to have more of such things next time. Thank you very much. Next year. Thank you.
Mary Jane says climate resilience is our hope for tomorrow. Sophia?
Thank you. I'll be fast, partly because both, Dr. Mary Jane and President.
Your audio is slightly muted, Sophia. Not muted, but inaudible, sorry.
Headphones give me problems. Is that better?
Yes, your voice is amplified.
Both President Faluke and Dr. Mary Jane are very, very difficult people to follow, so I will keep it very short. But what I'd like to say is, for researchers and communicators, it's really important to focus on the solutions to these problems. You know, I see in my work a lot, there's a lot of analysis of what are the problems and what are the issues, but we know a lot about that. What we need to know more about is what are the solutions. You know, what are women, what are communities on the ground doing to solve their problems, to cope with climate change, to adapt to climate change. And you know, the conversation included an interesting article on Indigenous strategies to adapt. But you know, I think researchers and communicators can start to identify some of the important factors that are critical for solutions to the crises that farmers are facing. And just to finish, I'd like to put in a little advertisement for the Taylor and Francis journal that I am co-editor of, Gender, Technology and Development. Please send us your research. We'll be very, very happy to publish it. Thank you.
Sophia says submit now. Bernice, any last words, or has all been said?
No, I think most of it's been said. Maybe just from the perspective of an intergovernmental organization. So is to take the messages from everybody and to raise the African voice. We have in terms of communication, we've got a very strong platform at the continental and regional levels to raise the African voice in global food systems discussions, in continental food systems discussions. So, you know, that's really, we don't want to get involved in holding anybody back, to provide the enabling environment and really to support visibility and uptake of the messages that are coming from the people who are actually doing the work and who are faced directly with the challenges. So that for us, I think, is a big priority, and to then continue to foster the integration between blue economy, food systems, climate smart systems, etc. So that's it. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, I couldn't find a short one for you, but I think integration and collaboration is key. Thank you to the attendees, and a special thank you to my guests, but a further special thank you to President Ariola. We appreciate that you are here. I certainly enjoyed this conversation and hope our guests enjoyed it too, because without attendees, there is no conversation. And just to say thank you once more, and the conversation will continue in 2026, but the conversation continues with you implementing and contributing to food systems research and practices. With that being said, have a pleasant afternoon, and we'll see you in 2026. Enjoy the festive season, be safe, and continue to prosper and flourish. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And bye, everyone.